It was just after 6:45 p.m. when Malik Thompson turned onto the long driveway of his own estate, a quiet, expansive property just outside Atlanta, nestled behind iron gates, trimmed hedges, and white stone walls that whispered success without screaming it. Malik wasn't flashy. Despite being one of the youngest senior executives at one of the top defense tech firms in the country, he still drove the same dark Tesla Model S he'd bought 6 years earlier, still wore clean but understated jackets, and still answered his own door. But tonight, something felt off before he even reached the gate. Blue and red lights were flashing through the tree line. 3 squad cars, parked directly across his private entrance, completely blocking the path. Malik slowed the car, then came to a full stop, confusion knitting his brow. He checked his phone. No calls, no alerts. Security system showed no breach. Nothing was out of place. And yet, the officer stood firm, hands on hips, eyes trained on his vehicle, as if he were the intruder. He rolled the window down halfway and leaned out. "Evening," he called calmly. "Is there an issue?" One of the officers, a square-jawed white man with mirrored sunglasses still on despite the fading light, stepped forward. "This is private property," he said curtly. Malik blinked. "I know. That's my name on the gate." He gestured toward the brass plate mounted into the stone pillar. "Thompson Estate." But the officer didn't move. "Step out of the vehicle, sir." "Excuse me?" "We received a call about a suspicious vehicle entering this property." "You mean my vehicle," Malik said, keeping his voice even. The officer's jaw flexed. "We'll need to verify that." Malik's hands gripped the steering wheel for a second, then released. He knew this tone. He had grown up learning to recognize it. It wasn't about law or safety. It was about control, about putting him in his place, a place they had already decided was beneath the gate, not behind it. And so, Malik sighed, unlocked his phone, tapped once, and said clearly, "My name is Malik Thompson. I own this estate, and you are currently trespassing. I suggest you call your supervisor before you make this any worse." The officer smirked. Big words for someone behind tinted glass. Seconds later, another squad car pulled up, this one unmarked. And when the driver's door opened, the expression on the officer's face changed. Because the man getting out was Chief Deputy Sandra Klein, and she was walking toward Malik's car with visible urgency. The moment Chief Deputy Sandra Klein stepped out of her unmarked cruiser, the tension in the air shifted. She didn't walk. She strode, with purpose, her eyes locked onto the officers standing between Malik and his own gate. The junior officers straightened up immediately, one of them even removing his sunglasses, as if realizing, too late, how ridiculous he looked now. Sandra didn't look at them. She went straight to Malik's window where he had remained calm, hands resting visibly on the wheel. She nodded once, a mixture of apology and recognition in her expression. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice low and tight, "I am very sorry for this." Malik didn't reply right away. He looked at her, then slowly turned his eyes to the officers standing behind her. The ones who had stopped him, questioned him, tried to remove him from land with his own name on it. "I take it you didn't send them?" he asked. "Absolutely not. I was just informed a few minutes ago. The report came from a neighbor. Someone claimed they saw a suspicious vehicle enter your property. Dispatch sent the closest units without verifying ownership." She lowered her voice further. "But this shouldn't have escalated like this." Malik gave a small, dry laugh. "It always escalates like this. Just depends who's behind the wheel." Chief Klein's face tightened with discomfort. She turned to the officers. "Name and badge numbers. Now." They hesitated, which made everything worse. One of them, Officer Dawson, finally muttered his ID number. The others followed, all visibly uncomfortable, now that it was clear they hadn't just harassed a regular citizen, but someone who had the power to hold them accountable. Someone with reach, with respect, with receipts. Malik stepped out of the car now, smooth and unhurried. He stood tall, his presence more commanding than any uniform. He looked at the group of men, then back at Sandra. "I want them off my property, and I want an incident report filed tonight. Every word, every detail. This isn't just trespassing. It's profiling. It's intimidation. It's illegal. Yes, sir, she said. I'll personally oversee it. He took one more step toward the officers. You assumed I didn't belong. You judged me before I said a single word. But the fact is, I employ more people in this district than your whole department. I pay more in property tax than 3 blocks combined. And you just violated every protocol you swore to uphold. The officer said nothing, but Malik wasn't finished. Effective immediately, I'm revoking all access permissions for county patrol vehicles to use my road as a shortcut. I'm pulling my security contract with the department and moving it to a private firm, and I will be filing a civil complaint that landed like thunder. Chief Klein blinked. Malik, Mr. Thompson, I understand you're angry, but I'm not angry, he said. I'm used to this. I'm just done being silent. Then, with quiet authority, he said to the group, You're dismissed. Leave. The officers stood for a moment, unsure whether they should actually obey. But Klein waved them off, her voice firm now. Go. All of you. They climbed into their cars, faces flushed, and drove off slowly, the flashing lights finally fading into the night. Malik didn't watch them go. He simply turned, entered the code at his own gate, and drove through, calm, composed, and completely in control. Inside the estate, the lights from his house flickered on like a beacon. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply walked up his steps and disappeared inside, already planning his next move. Because for men like him, survival wasn't enough anymore. Now, it was time to build systems that couldn't be used against him. Systems where he no longer needed to explain himself to anyone, especially not at his own gate. By the next morning, the incident was already circulating behind closed doors. Word traveled fast when power was involved, especially when that power didn't look the way most people expected. Malik Thompson wasn't just another man with money. He was a black man with generational vision, a sharp legal team and influence in both private and political sectors. And now he was angry, which meant people were nervous. Emails flew across county offices. Phone calls came in from city council members, lawyers, even local journalists trying to sniff out a story before it exploded publicly. But Malik hadn't said a word to the press. Not yet. He didn't need to. His silence made them more afraid than a headline. Back at the precinct, the 3 officers involved were pulled into internal review meetings. One tried to downplay it. Standard protocol, community complaint, we were just doing our job. But no one was buying it. The dispatch audio alone made that impossible. The tone, the language, the aggression, and worst of all, the complete lack of probable cause. Meanwhile, Malik was sitting in a glass-walled conference room in Midtown, surrounded by his legal advisors and private security firm reps. He had already begun severing contracts tied to the local precinct. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about restructuring. This isn't just about me, he said, his voice steady. This happens to people every day who don't have the money or position to push back. I'm not just firing officers. I'm redesigning access, policy, oversight. One of the advisors, a woman in a tailored Navy suit, nodded. You want to make this structural. I want to make it impossible for this to happen again, Malik said. Not just here. Anywhere my name is attached. He had already started drafting a public statement, not a reactive, emotional post, a calm, deliberate piece that laid out facts and intentions, without needing to name names or beg for sympathy, because that wasn't his style. Across town, Chief Deputy Sandra Klein was pacing in her office. She'd known Malik for years, had even met his mother once at a civic dinner. She knew he wasn't bluffing, and she knew what this would mean for the department. When she called him later that afternoon, her tone was respectful but heavy. Malik, I want to talk face to face. Please. There was a pause on the line, then his voice, calm as ever. I'll meet you at my office. 8 a.m. sharp. And don't bring a badge. Click. Malik set his phone down and leaned back in his chair. The room was quiet, but he felt none of the chaos. He wasn't rattled. He was preparing. Because chapter by chapter, brick by brick, he wasn't just defending his name. He was rewriting the rules of power on his terms. At exactly 7:59 a.m., Malik stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his office, sipping black coffee from a plain ceramic mug. The skyline stretched beyond the glass, like a silent witness to what was about to happen. No camera crews, no noise, just precision. He didn't like surprises. He liked systems, ones that worked, ones he could control. At 8 o'clock sharp, the receptionist buzzed him. "Chief Deputy Klein is here." He didn't answer, just turned slightly and said, "Send her in." Sandra Klein entered alone, wearing civilian clothes as requested, a dark blazer over a gray blouse, no badge in sight. Her face looked worn, but her stride was firm. She was a woman used to holding authority, but today she was walking into someone else's territory. Malik motioned toward the seat across from his desk without saying a word. She sat. The silence stretched for a long, deliberate moment. Then, finally, Malik spoke. "You've seen the footage?" She nodded. "Yes." "You've read the dispatch transcript?" Another nod. "I have." "Then I'll skip the part where I explain how 3 officers tried to block me from entering my own home, questioned my identity, and demanded I prove I belonged there. All because I was a black man driving a clean car through a white neighborhood." Her mouth opened slightly, but he raised a hand. "No, don't defend them." "Not here." Klein looked down briefly. "I won't. I'm not here to protect them." "Then why are you here?" "To ask what you want," she said, quiet but clear. "Because you could take this to court, to the media, to the mayor. You could cost the department more than money. And you haven't." Yet Malik studied her face. "I'm not interested in press," he said. "That's too cheap. Too easy. This isn't about humiliation, it's about precedent." He opened a folder on his desk and slid it across to her. Inside was a printed document. Not a legal complaint, but something worse. A proposal. Outlined on the pages were new policy demands. Independent racial bias audits of the department, mandatory civilian oversight on misconduct investigations, and an immediate termination of all current patrol access to private gated communities without written resident authorization. Not just at his home, but district-wide. Klein blinked. "You want to rewrite how we operate?" "No," Malik said. "You're going to rewrite it. Or I will, and if we don't, I'll use every dime, every contact, and every ounce of visibility I have to make sure no one ever trusts a single patrol in your department again. I'll fund private security co-ops for communities like mine, and I'll make sure your budget shrinks until your office is a footnote in someone else's memoir." Klein's breath caught, but she didn't argue, because she knew he meant it. "This goes beyond my precinct," she said finally. "Good," Malik said. "Then maybe it'll go beyond just me." He stood. Meeting over. Klein rose slowly, picked up the folder, and nodded once. Not in defeat, but in reluctant respect. As she walked out, Malik sat back down, flipped open his laptop, and began writing again. It wasn't revenge he was after. It was reform, and he wasn't waiting for permission. That afternoon, while the precinct scrambled to review Malik's demands, and Klein briefed her superiors on the political earthquake heading their way, Malik was already 10 steps ahead. He had called a meeting, private, quiet, off the books. A handful of trusted colleagues and community leaders sat with him around a polished walnut conference table in a secured space downtown. No phones allowed, no recordings, only impact. "This isn't about me being disrespected," he began, eyes scanning the room. "It's about the system assuming I don't belong until I prove otherwise. And that assumption is costing us more than time. It's costing lives, dignity, peace." One man, a local business owner who'd known Malik since college, nodded slowly. "So, what do you want us to do?" "I want to build something better," Malik said. "Not a protest. Not a statement. A structure." He clicked a button, and the screen behind him lit up with a name. Gatekeep. "It's a community defense network," he explained. "Independent security, legal protection, real-time incident recording, encrypted alerts, and a rapid response legal team. Think of it as the inverse of Neighborhood Watch, except we're watching the ones in uniform." Murmurs moved around the room. He let them settle. Every gate, every address, every homeowner of color who's ever been told to prove they belong, we build them a wall of protection no badge can breach without accountability. Someone asked, "You've already started?" I never stopped, Malik said. In the weeks after the incident, he'd been quietly redirecting assets, assembling teams, and planting the seeds for a system that would do what local law enforcement had failed to: serve and protect everyone, not just those who fit the image of who belongs. By the time the meeting ended, half the room had already committed funds. The other half promised introductions to larger allies. Later that evening, Malik stood again at the gate of his estate, this time alone. No flashing lights, no squad cars, just the soft hum of cicadas and the quiet swing of the iron doors opening on command. His command. He looked at the black metal, then at the security camera now embedded directly above it. His own, his system. As he walked up the path toward the house, his phone buzzed. A message from his attorney. 3 officers placed on administrative leave. Klein wants another meeting. You've got momentum. Media's starting to ask questions. Malik didn't smile. He didn't need to. He just texted back, "Let them ask. I'll answer when I'm ready." Because this wasn't a headline for him. This was a blueprint. Days turned into a week, and the city was starting to feel the tremor beneath the surface. Headlines were cautious. Executives encounter with police sparks internal review. Private security replacing local patrols in affluent communities. But Malik didn't speak to reporters. Not yet. He was still building and watching carefully who tried to get in his way. One of those people was Councilman Jared Fielding, a polished, well-spoken man who'd shaken Malik's hand at fundraisers for years, smiling wide for the cameras, while quietly backing policies that harmed communities like Malik's behind closed doors. Now, Fielding was nervous. Too many donors were calling. Too many questions were being asked about the police budget and its usefulness in neighborhoods that were clearly over-policed and underprotected. So Fielding asked for a meeting. Malik agreed, but not in private. They met at a public policy roundtable downtown. Cameras in the room, mics on the table. Malik wore a simple black sweater. No logos, no suit. He didn't need the optics. He was the message. Fielding tried to steer the conversation toward misunderstandings, trust building, and reestablishing communication between public institutions and high-value residents. Malik didn't let him. "I'm not interested in repairing a bridge that was never built," he said flatly. "I'm interested in replacing it." The room went still. He continued. "There was no misunderstanding when officers surrounded my car at my gate. There was no broken trust, because there was never any trust to begin with. What I experienced wasn't a glitch. It was a feature of a system that assumes people who look like me are dangerous until proven otherwise." Fielding tried to deflect. Malik didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt. He just watched as the man squirmed on record. After the meeting, Malik stepped outside and was met by a group of younger activists waiting on the steps. They had watched the stream live, many of them clutching notebooks, cameras, or just raw hope. One of them stepped forward, barely 20 years old, nervous but inspired. "How did you stay so calm?" he asked. Malik looked at him. "Because I'm not here to react. I'm here to replace." That night, back at home, Malik walked the perimeter of his property. The private security team nodded as he passed, fully briefed, fully accountable, not just to him, but to the community protocols he had established through gatekeep. The same officers who once stopped him had now been suspended. Internal Affairs had launched an investigation, and for the first time in Malik's memory, people were listening, not because he shouted, but because he refused to let the story be reshaped. The system was creaking, and Malik was no longer knocking on the door. He was designing a new one. 2 months later, the city looked the same. On the surface, the skyline still shimmered at night, sirens still echoed in the distance, and patrol cars still rolled through neighborhoods. But beneath it all, something had shifted. People were watching differently, asking more questions, refusing to accept the old answers. At the center of that shift was Malik Thompson. He hadn't gone silent. He had gone strategic. Gatekeep had launched in full, not just in his neighborhood, but across 3 districts. Every member-owned property had real-time surveillance, encrypted incident logging, immediate legal response, and, most critically, a direct channel to civil rights counsel if anything went wrong. The app was growing fast, quietly, powerfully. City officials tried to ignore it, then tried to minimize it. Then, finally, they asked to join it. Malik declined. One afternoon, he received a formal invitation to a private roundtable at the governor's mansion. The email was polite, polished, full of bureaucratic niceties. It ended with, "We'd like to discuss a path forward together." He didn't answer. Instead, he hosted his own event, in the heart of the city, at a cultural center, funded in part by his own foundation. No marble staircases, no suits. Just community organizers, legal analysts, tech developers, and neighborhood leaders from around the state. He took the stage in jeans and a black long-sleeve shirt. No teleprompter, no pre-written speech, just clarity. "When the police blocked me from my own home, I wasn't surprised," he said. "I was tired. Tired of being the exception. Tired of surviving systems that weren't built for us. So I stopped asking for permission. I stopped waiting to be treated fairly. I built my own infrastructure instead." He looked out at the crowd. "If you're waiting for the system to protect you, you'll wait forever. But if you build your own, one rooted in accountability, not fear, you don't just change the rules, you change the playing field." The crowd rose to their feet, not in applause, in solidarity. By the end of the month, Gatekeep had spread into 2 more states. Cities were quietly reaching out. Foundations were offering funding. And Malik? He kept his phone on silent. Because power wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It stood at the gate and watched as the world finally began to knock. Not with demands, but with respect.